Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight in North Hollywood. My name is Karen Swift, and I'm Metro's Community Relations Manager for the San Fernando Valley. I also want to extend a special welcome to those of you who are watching us tonight online from your home computers or from your homes. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. So tonight we're here in North Hollywood to talk about the Metro Orange Line Improvements Project. So you may have gotten these question cards as you walked in tonight. We will be coming around to collect these from you. If you're watching online, you can have the opportunity to ask your questions online through the chat function as well. And Tito's here and he'll be collecting those question cards from those of you in the audience. But first I want to take a few minutes to acknowledge some individuals who are here from our elected officials office. We're fortunate to have several staff from our Metro Board of Directors offices. So I'd like to acknowledge David Perry and Jason Maruka from Supervisor Catherine Barger's office, Jessica Oriana from the Office of Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, Doug Mensman from the Office of Director Paul Krikorian, also a Metro Board Director, and then Jeff Jacoberger is here from Council Member Bob Blumenfield's office. Thank you so much for being here tonight. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first presenter tonight, Scott Page, our Senior Director from Service Planning. Scott?
Thank you, Karen, and good evening, everyone. We have a lot of exciting things going on along the Orange Line, and particularly over in Warner Center, where the Orange Line serves the Canoga Station, as well as it used to serve the Owensmouth Warner Center Transit Hub. So let's get started with our Warner Center bus service improvements. Approximately about a year ago, our staff started working in service planning on how we could better serve Warner Center with the existing Orange Line, and we're going to tell you about some exciting things that are coming on the Orange Line that led us to speed up that process somewhat and get ready for the future. So let's get started. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Orange Line background. It first opened to the public on October the 29th, 2005. It was later extended to the Chatsworth Station in 2012. Average daily ridership has reached 29,000 boardings, 74 million boardings since opening of the line. Now let's go to the Warner Center improvements. Let's talk about how that started. The Orange Line will be electrified by 2020, and we'll hear a little bit more about that later tonight. The existing station on Owensmouth Avenue cannot accommodate a charging station. Request for service has long since been received by Westfield, Topanga, and the New Village, particularly during Christmas. We also want to provide better connections to employment. Existing one-stop creates long walks to many destinations within Warner Center. Ridership at the current Warner Center station is low relative to the Orange Line itself, even after the opening of the Village at Topanga. Staff reviewed each route with the following goals. Provide more direct connections to the Orange Line by creating a new transit hub at Canoga Station. Streamline service in Warner Center by simplifying the routes taken out of direction to connect with the Orange Line. Improve travel time while traversing Warner Center by the existing routes. And expand access to the New Village at Topanga, at Westfield Topanga. So what came out of that was the new Warner Center shuttle, line 601, and that line started actually yesterday on June the 24th. The shuttle has 10 stops, and as you can see on the map, it starts at Kaiser Hospital and Corporate Center Park, and it goes to the west on Burbank, and then it goes north on Canoga. It goes over to Oxnard to Owensmouth. It still stops at the old transit center there, the old transit hub. Continues north all the way up to Van Owen and across Van Owen to Canoga and into the Canoga station. It operates, by the way, every 10 minutes, 7 days a week. It operates 24 hours a day. We now have Orange Line service 24 hours a day to the Chatsworth station. We never had that before yesterday. So one of the things that we wanted to give to the Warner Center community was their own special identity, their own special bus. And this is something that we worked very hard on with the marketing department to come up with this special looking bus. These are brand new flyers. They're 40-foot buses. They came with this nice wrap that we put on it, and I think it looks pretty cool. And you know when it goes down the street, it's not just an orange Metro bus, and hey, where is it going? You know that that's the Warner Center shuttle, line 601, and it's going to take you to the Canoga station. So let's talk about the other improvements. Because we were moving the transit hub up to Canoga, we also then needed to bring the other lines up to Canoga, and we also took this opportunity to straighten out some lines. Lines 161, 169, and 750, which used to end at the old Warner Center Transit Hub, were extended up to Canoga. So it makes for a much better connection for those 3 lines for those people that were going to get to the Orange Line. They used to pick up the Orange Line at Owensmouth, but think about it, that was every 8 minutes. The Orange Line's every 4 minutes on the main line, but when it went to Owensmouth, it became an 8-minute service. So by extending that route to Canoga, now they have a bus every 4 minutes. So it like doubled their opportunities to grab a bus faster back over to North Hollywood or up to Chatsworth. The route of line 169 was also extended over to provide additional service on Topanga Canyon between Irwin Street and Victory Boulevard. So it originally used to cut over to Owensmouth on Oxnard and went up. Now it's going to go straight up Topanga and over to the new transit center on Victory. So that's an improvement also for the 169 line patrons. They have further access north and across through the Warner Center area. The new circulator provides a 2-way service. We didn't want to have a big a big one-way loop where you had to walk 1 block this way and 1 block that way to return back up to Canoga. We wanted you to get off at 1 stop southbound and then pick it up right across the street northbound to go back up to Canoga Station. We also streamlined line 150 and 164. So the 150 used to come up Topanga and across on, I think it's on Oxnard, and then up through all the way to Canoga, believe it or not, and up Canoga, back over to Victory, and back over to Topanga Canyon. So basically, everyone was getting a tour of Warner Center, but ironically, over 70% of the riders wanted to get up to Sherman Way. So all those people were getting a nice tour of Warner Center, but that's really not where the majority of the people wanted to go. So we extended the 150 up to Sherman Way on Topanga by making it strictly on Topanga Canyon. So it's much faster for the 150 riders that want to get up to also a high school that's up there near Sherman Way. And the 164 line was the same way. About 80% of the people that rode on Victory on line 164 were getting a tour of Warner Center because it used to come down Owensmouth, across Oxnard, straight back up to Topanga, and then back west on Victory. So it's just been straightened out. It just goes back and forth now on Victory the way it used to before the Orange Line started. And you can make connections to the Orange Line at the DeSoto station. So everyone on the 164 still has direct access right to the Orange Line at DeSoto station. So now I want to talk about something that we're doing at Metro system-wide, not just in Warner Center and not just in the San Fernando Valley, it's the entire system, and that's our next-gen bus study. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what that entails. So what is next-gen and why are we doing this? Well, we have an outdated bus network. The network is 25 plus years old since its last redesign, but the metro area itself has been growing. We have over 1 million new residents in the Los Angeles area. There are more places to go and new destinations. A lot of places are gentrifying with new restaurants and new malls, so we know there's new places where people want to go. And there are also more ways to get there, and we want to know how people have changed their travel patterns. Are they using TNCs? Are they driving more now? How are they going to work or to their events that they want to go to? We also know from hearing from patrons through our studies that Metro doesn't go where I need to go anymore. So we want to know about where they want to go now. So let's talk about, I have back on the table, by the way, some brochures, and on the back of that is a website. I encourage everybody to pick up a brochure, and you can do a short survey for me. You just go online and do it at your leisure at home with a cup of coffee. Next, I'm going to have Steve Shupak from Vehicle Technology Group at Metro come up and talk about the new vehicle technology that's proposed for the Orange Line. He's our expert on zero-emission buses. Steve?
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate the lead-in. Once again, I'm Steve Shupak. I'm the Electric Vehicle Program Manager here at Metro, and in 2016, we were tasked with electrifying our Orange Line and Silver Lines, and I'm happy to bring an update to you on our plans and progress here on the Orange Line. As you see in the picture right here, it's a standard articulated vehicle, and behind it you see, as Scott mentioned, a large piece of charging equipment. That mast behind it is what the bus drives under, and then that will come down and charge it at the endpoints of Chatsworth, Canoga, and North Hollywood. In addition to that charging mast, there's also a large box that holds the actual electrical equipment for each charger. So it is not a portable unit, but requires quite a bit of construction and engineering to put together. As I said, we're going to be doing the Orange Line and Silver Line. So far, we have contracts in place for all the vehicles for all lines, and New Flyer articulators are going to be going on the Orange Line, and BYD 40-footers will be going on the Silver Line. Some of the benefits of zero emission, obviously, are no tailpipe emissions. And they're also a quieter vehicle without the CNG engine, without the cooling fans, and other equipment. It's a much quieter vehicle, so you can have chats. It's going to be better for passengers in the vehicle and also for residents along the alignments where you're not having vehicles sit and parked and idling and running the cooling systems, the air conditioners, the engines. It's going to be better for the entire alignment. Being electric vehicles, they have excellent low-end torque. So when you're coming from a stop, off the stop line, you've got instant acceleration. So the New Flyer buses actually have power going to the middle and rear axles. So we should see much better performance with them. Since they're a 15-year newer vehicle, we're anticipating much better ride quality through advances in suspension and geometry. So, like I said earlier, we had 40 buses from New Flyer, 5 from BYD, both going on the Orange Line. And in the bottom of the picture, you can see this box or this bungalow. That's what's housing the electrical equipment that's feeding the power into these buses. The concept is that these buses will come into an endpoint, Chatsworth, North Hollywood, and Canoga, and during their normal layover of 7 to 10 minutes, they'll sit and charge under that mast, and they'll get enough juice pumped back into them to go for about another full lap up and down the system. So it's endpoint to endpoint again. And here you see what conceptual drawing looks like of the at a station. And the really exciting news is we're in addition to the charging equipment that's going on along the alignment, we're also putting in some depot chargers out at Division 8. We've been working on this one now for about the last 2.5 months, and we anticipated the construction work for laying all this conduit, putting these the electrical boxes and so forth in, having that done around September. So right now we've got the back wall of the division, which is about 700 feet torn up, and there's a lot of dirt, but we got a lot of pipe, and it's very exciting that we're actually seeing progress coming about. So in addition to the trenching work, then we get DWP coming in and coordinating and bringing the electrical service, and then the actual equipment suppliers putting the physical chargers on. And we'll have room for up to 10 chargers. We will have 5 BYD shop chargers, and then we'll have 2 more for the New Flyer buses. And with that, I will conclude and welcome any questions later on. And now next improvements with David Meager.
Okay. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I'm just curious, how many of you folks are either, I want to do transit riders or residents or other? Transit riders, Orange Line, okay, good turnout on that. Folks that maybe live along one of the lines near the route, about 50-50 I think we're talking tonight. So I'll try to characterize my comments for each of you. And about others, are there others here? Just interested people. Okay, got a few people. So today, for those of you that might have been out last week, we were sort of focusing on our new line on Van Nuys Boulevard, which is going to go to our board of directors this Thursday. The recommendation is that would be a light rail project, which is similar to the line that runs from Pasadena to downtown, or the one that runs from Santa Monica to Culver City to downtown. It's the form of light rail that we haven't had in the Valley before. It'll be the first light rail line in the Valley. It'll be running on Van Nuys Boulevard, north and south, on the route where the current buses run, the rapid buses run on Van Nuys. It'll replace the rapid buses. We'll still have the locals, and that'll be starting construction in 2021. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Orange Line, though, tonight, and some of the other projects we're doing in the Valley, and we'll let's see if I can get a picture up here. And I wanted to just sort of focus here on With Measure M, which passed November 2016, the Valley got several new projects that are coming online to improve transit service. You've heard about some of the things we're doing on the Orange Line, which is from North Hollywood out to Canoga Park and Chatsworth. This is the Van Nuys line, starts right at Van Nuys at Oxnard and the bus line north on Van Nuys Boulevard all the way up to San Fernando Road. It has stops at the Metrolink line that goes to Ventura, at the Metrolink line to Sylmar San Fernando, and it also will run along San Fernando Road along that route. So it's about 9 miles long. That'll be the light rail route. This big brownish orange color is what we're calling our Northeast San Fernando Valley Bus Rapid Transit line. It'll be much like the Orange Line. The difference, though, is there's not an old railroad right-of-way to run the buses in. It'll run on street. But we're looking at streets like Roscoe or Nordhoff, and generally it'll start at Chatsworth and run along the northern part of the valley, past Cal State Northridge, east-west. It'll have a stop on Van Nuys Boulevard to pick up or drop off from the light rail line. And then in this area of the valley, in the far east valley, it'll have a connection point to possibly go north up to Mission College or San Fernando, or go south, perhaps down through Sun Valley and down to North Hollywood to the North Hollywood Metrolink station. That study is going to be starting in the fall. Sarah Syed is our PM, who's in the back. If you have questions about that, you can talk to her after this meeting, and then we'll have some public meetings on that later in the fall. I'd also like to point out for any of you that ride the 501 line, which runs from North Hollywood Station over to Pasadena, we're looking at do some significant upgrades to that. This area here is showing that area that goes from North Hollywood out through Burbank, Glendale, Eagle Rock, over to Pasadena, another bus rapid transit line that could be either on the 134 freeway, or it could be on an arterial street serving more uses. I'll talk about that one in just a minute. But these are 4 major projects we have going on simultaneously right now in the Valley. We're getting going with those, and so that's why Karen has us out here quite a bit doing community meetings to tell people about these and get a lot of input into them. See if I can get this to go forward. So again, the Orange Line BRT improvements, I'm not going to step on what Scott already talked about, so I'll skip over that. This is the 18-mile-long route, which today takes almost an hour to go east-west from North Hollywood all the way to Chatsworth. It's a long ride on that bus. There's 35 at-grade crossings along the route, and 2, the ones at Van Nuys and Sepulveda, are current at-grade crossings, and the bus goes across the valley. We try to work with the city of DOT, Department of Transportation, to get bus signal priority to speed the buses up. But each one of those north-south streets has very heavy traffic on it. There's traffic lights, so the bus winds up stopping a lot along the route. And we're looking to ways to speed up the bus, make it move faster. We're also looking at ways to carry more people. We don't have the funds to put light rail on the Orange Line. That's still a couple of decades in the future under the funding plans that we have. But we are trying to make the buses faster and make them carry more people so we can give people an easier ride, more seats, and more convenience. What you'll see on this map here, we have blue dots. Those are the areas where we're actually going to reinstate some of the railroad-type gates that were here historically when we had a railroad running along the Orange Line. And what those do, and if has any of you been over to the Expo Line or the Pasadena Gold Line, the gates actually come there, and the gates that come down, they actually keep people from driving their cars in front of the buses. They're a safety feature, and we put those in to actually also let the bus continue through without having to stop at as many red lights, because they get preemption on the signals, but to get preemption, we have to actually run them a little bit less frequently, so we don't interrupt the traffic signals quite as often, but we can actually be able to go through without stopping, and so we'll only be stopping at the transit stations, but not at all the red lights going across the valley. And you'll see 2 red dots there at Van Nuys and Sepulveda. Those are the 2 heaviest traffic streets north-south in the valley, so we're actually looking to do a grade separation at those 2 locations. I don't know if you've been up to the Chatsworth station. We actually have a grade separation up there on Lassen where it goes over the street and comes down into the station with the Ventura Metrolink line and the BRT station there. So this is something we can do to actually provide to not impact the traffic, to get the buses through quicker. And in these 2 areas, they're largely commercial industrial areas, at least in the immediate proximity of the station. So we think they can be good neighbors in these locations and allow us to get to do better by the cars and do better for the transit and get the benefits of both going at the same time. In terms of travel time, if we can get this project built the way we've just described it, that'll cut about 10 minutes off of that Cross Valley trip, or about a 20% travel time savings, get us down into the 40-minute travel time instead of 50 minutes plus. We think the ridership will go up by about 10,000 per day, so the 29,000 that Scott was talking about, we can get up to close to 40,000 people a day, so that those trains coming into North Hollywood Station, when you come up, you actually will have buses that can carry you, and you won't have to wait for the buses to have room to carry passengers. And then the safety, we think it's definitely going to improve safety along the line. We have people that are used to making right turns on red into the busway, or who might think they can beat the light and make a turn, or some people who even think the busway is a roadway, and they'll start driving on the busway. So the gates will actually help improve the safety there and help maintain that kind of environment. The project right now, we're actually in what's called preliminary engineering design. I'll show you some of the things we're looking at. It's very early phases of design, and I'm going to show you some stuff that's kind of sketchy, so you'll have to bear with me, but we want to sort of show these ideas as we're developing them and come out frequently, ask people for input. We also are going to, I'll talk through these each one. The PE design, we'll show you some pictures. We have a pilot gate. We're going to test out one of these gates. We have a location. We're going to actually put a real world gate in this fall, try it out, see how it works, make sure it's operating properly before we go and install 30 or plus more. We're working with the DOT on traffic. We don't want to have traffic impacts with this. We want to work with them on the traffic signals and make sure that it's operating to be a benefit for everyone. And we have to coordinate with that East San Fernando Valley project, which is also in design on Van Nuys Boulevard. And I'll talk to you a minute about the Sepulveda Corridor project, which is our long-term goal to connect the valley to the west side through the Sepulveda Pass. So this is what it looks like with gates at a crossing, and we've sort of made this rendering to show an image of what it would be like. It's pretty much like you see at light rail gates, only in this case it's a bus coming through the intersection. This one I think is at DeSoto as an example. As you come up, you'll get the same type of traffic lights with a yellow, red, green light. And then when the gates come down, we have an option on this. I think there's a couple of gentlemen here I know who live along the route who've asked about, is it going to be noisy, are there going to be bells, are there going to be horns? We're actually looking at, in the pilot gate program, we're going to look at ways. The main thing is we want to make it safe. We want to make people aware that the gates are coming down. Traffic lights might not be enough, so we need to have either audible or visual warning signs on the gates, so we're going to be testing out different ways of showing that. There's also strips that you can put in the pavement that actually the flashing lights in the pavement. So there's a number of different ways we can warn people about this. We're going to try to be sensitive to noise as an issue and not put them in a close proximity to homes and where people are sleeping. So we're going to have to test out some different ways of making sure that people are aware that the gates are there and drivers are aware of them, but that they're not creating a nuisance. The buses, as we said, are going to be very quiet with the electric buses running, so we're going to get quieter buses operating in the right-of-way, but we don't want to lose that benefit of quieter buses by having noisier gates, so we're going to try to get those trade-offs right. This is just an intersection. I think this is Woodman. We just wanted to show you one of the types of designs we're doing to show it. But when you, the busway is right here. It kind of goes through the intersection of Woodman right north of Oxnard Street. And then we have the bike path that runs along in this area. So the bikes come along and you cross at the crosswalk and then continue on the bike path. So the north-south traffic on White Oak, when you come in, you have a stop right here where there's a light. In this case, there would be a gate that would come across right on the edge of the busway. It would come down, so in addition to the red light, you would have a gate that would come down. And then you have on the northbound side, you'd have gates on that side as well, so that these would come down, the buses would come through, then the gates would go back up, and then it would be synced with the north-south traffic, so the traffic could continue through. We're looking at keeping the left turn pockets where they exist. In this case, with the gates, we actually have to have a center median, and that's a safety issue too, because we don't want people trying to drive across and go in the opposite direction, the oncoming traffic, to drive around a gate. We're going to have quad gates, so there really wouldn't be the opportunity to do that, but we do need this median, a raised median, to actually put the gate stanchion on, because in the middle of the street, we have to have a little bit raised area to do that. So we're laying out these layouts for each of the crossings. We're working with the City Bureau of Street Services and Department of Transportation on them to make sure that they're accommodable and working. We're doing traffic studies on this. And then we'll be coming back later in the fall as we start to come one by one in these areas for where we're proposing to do this. This is our pilot gate location. It's actually a LA DOT service yard that's just east of Sepulveda Boulevard. This is Sepulveda This is the big park and ride lot for the Sepulveda BRT station, the 405 freeway. And then just east of there, there's a lot that's used by the LA Bureau of Street Services that has a driveway. So we're going to test this out by putting a gate in here so that the buses come through, and the gate would just essentially just block access to the bus yards or to the service yard that's there. So DOT City's going to work with us on that. We're going to test it out. One of the things we want to make sure is when you have rail, the rail sends a signal through the wheels, the steel wheels, to the steel rail, to where the gates are, and you have this positive contact that guarantees that the gates are going to open and close at the right time. With buses, you have rubber tires on asphalt, and you don't have that kind of connection. So one of the things we really want to make sure is that the kind of connection we make here is fail-safe. In other words, there's no situation where a bus could come and the gates wouldn't close and come down. So this is going to be our test for this. We did find, actually in Fort Collins, Colorado, they have a busway using gates. And so we've taken a look at their technology for doing this. And so this is something that it isn't like it hasn't been done before, but before we implement it, we want to test this out, make sure it's working before we go ahead and order the rest of the gates. And I talked about the interface with our 2 other projects, and I think what I'll do is I'll just show a few pictures of the things that we're thinking of. This is what the grade separation would look like at Sepulveda. This is where the actual train station or the bus station right now is a little bit east of Sepulveda. And when you park your car there or want to get off a bus on Sepulveda, you have to walk a little ways towards the freeway to get to where the bus station is. So with this grade separation, we can actually pull the station back to be right over Sepulveda Boulevard. So if you're getting off of transferring to a bus, you can actually go vertically up into the station from the street, and it'll still have a connection on the west end next to the park and ride lot, so you can enter the station from the park and ride lot side as well. This is the LA Fitness that's right next to it. So we have and we have the Costco. Yeah, Costco. Thank you, on the east side. So there's a big parking lot there where that is. So we think this will be a good neighbor to the uses that we have there. At Van Nuys station, or this is Sepulveda too, and just a sample of how that might work. So Sepulveda Boulevard here. If you're on either side of it, you have stairs and escalators that will take you up to the platforms. This is the boarding platform, just like they have now, only it's about 25 feet up in the air, and the buses will come through in the middle. The platforms are on either side, eastbound and westbound. And then this platform will be designed so that in the future we can put in tracks on that and operate it like a light rail station. So we'll design it for the buses today. It'll be light rail at some point in the future. And this is another shot of it looking with the fitness center, the park and ride lot, the Costco, and the bus spanning over Sepulveda Boulevard. Yeah. So this, yeah, right. So this is where it's actually at its highest point, and then when it goes further to the east, it'll ramp down back to grade. And the same on the other side, it'll come over and come back down to grade. So it's just like an overcrossing. Okay, he doesn't want me to take questions. Okay, I'll keep going. Well, we're going to take questions at the end, with basically when we get the comment cards. At Van Nuys, this is a similar type of a design that we would have at Van Nuys. You would actually, if you're coming from North Hollywood, you would start rising, climbing up, go over to an at-grade. You'd have the station platforms on east-west. You go back down and rejoin the at-grade right away. This is where the station is planned to be on the East San Fernando Valley line. And one of the things we want to study is this is a little bit of a walk to get from this station to this station. Now that we know this is going to be here, we'd like to bring this station a little bit further south. So we're going to look at designs to make it so that this station can either be under this one, or perhaps it can turn around and come up next to it, where you could get off of the East San Fernando Valley line and go up the stairs and the escalator to get onto the bus. So we're working on these designs right now to make this, see how this works. I know we have some folks from Keys here tonight who are developing the property here, so we want to be good neighbors with them as well for that, so we can actually help get right now, which is just surface parking lots developed into some development that actually is good for everybody in the neighborhood. And this is kind of a sketch of what it might look like if the light rail station were at grade, and if the busway were elevated, and you'd have escalators, stairs, and elevators to connect from the busway above to the light rail below. And and I'm going to skip this one for too detailed. One of the things we want to do too is the crossings at Van Nuys and Sepulveda. There's a lot of traffic. Some people feel unsafe in those crosswalks. So if we're going to build this elevated busway, we'd like to actually make it elevated for pedestrians and bicyclists as well. So this is a design, this is one of the great, this is where we cross over the LA River out along Canoga, where we have a bike bridge over the LA River. So we're going to look at something similar to this that we could actually build next to the elevated busway that would take people up and over so that you wouldn't have to cross the crosswalk. If you're coming in on a bus, you want to cross over to one side or the other, or if you're on a bike and you want to cross over, you don't have to go through the crosswalk. You can have a continuous ride through those intersections. I'm going to talk about this other project. This is a bigger long-term project, and we've had a couple of meetings out in the 2 or 3 weeks ago. We had one in Van Nuys, we had one in Westwood, and one down by the airport. But this is a long-term project that we're just getting started, all the way from, we're up here in the valley on the Orange Line, under or through the Sepulveda Pass, the 405, connecting to UCLA, the VA Hospital, West Side, the Expo line, and then ultimately all the way down to LAX. And this would be, it's been envisioned to be a tunnel. It doesn't have to be, but as we're starting to look at it, we're looking at something that could be like a 10-mile tunnel to get you to Westwood, and then another 10 miles to get to the airport ultimately. So the first phase is to get through the Sepulveda Pass. It's the last count we saw, it's the, if not the heaviest used highway segment in the country, it's one in the top 5. And it's going to continue to get more and more demand on it. So we're looking for ways to get people, through the pass who don't have to use their cars as much for that commute. And if you can get from here to UCLA in 15 minutes, we think that would be a really good deal for people in the valley to have that kind of connectivity. And it would help the valley in terms of economic development and housing and the type of things that we would like to see here. There's several designs they're looking at. It's very early. They're working and having drawings where we're showing different types of alignments. I'm going to show you 3 or 4 that they've been showing in the meetings, and they're starting to look at. This is, of course, this is the 405 going up past the Getty and Skirball. This is where the purple line would be on Wilshire Boulevard, and this is where the Expo line that goes to Santa Monica is down a little bit further to the south. So we're looking at various alignments that could be tunnel. Generally, if they're not on the 405 freeway, they'll be in a tunnel, a deep tunnel under the mountains. There are a couple that actually would follow the freeway corridor itself in some kind of above ground configuration that we're looking at. It's very steep through the pass though, so there's a lot of issues about trying to follow the grade of the pass as it goes up and over in a transit vehicle. But they're looking at those. When you get to the valley, there's some alignments. This one is actually, if it comes in a subway or above ground, somewhere along the edge of the freeway near Sepulveda Boulevard, that's one possible alignment they were looking at that would stop at the Sepulveda station, have a transfer, and then potentially come over and join Van Nuys Boulevard somewhere like Victory or Sherman Way, where you could transfer to the new line on Van Nuys Boulevard. Another concept, which I think this one's had a lot of interest, is that if we're going to build a line on Van Nuys Boulevard, could that line just continue south and go below ground under Van Nuys Boulevard and continue into the mountains and over to the west side? And if you draw a straight line along this route and keep going south of Ventura Boulevard, it takes you right to Poly Pavilion. That's a straight line right to UCLA. And then from there, you could work your way back towards the freeway and down towards the airport. Longer term goal, we have some issues about just how does this line connect to this line, how it affects the station. So, but this is one concept we've been looking at. This is a variation of it. Some of the folks said, well, what if you don't know if you want to go to Van Nuys or Sepulveda? Perhaps there's something over here that connects into that you would want to be at Sepulveda near the freeway, whereas this one you're really more in Van Nuys. It's a little more urban area with the government center. Maybe you're connecting here, so the one line might continue north on Van Nuys and one might pick up the busway and go over to Sepulveda, and you'd have a choice of going on 2 different routes once you get to the valley. And I think I have one more. We actually had some folks saying, what about something like the Las Vegas monorail that might run above the pass and through the mountains, or something similar to that, which is rubber tire transit, where they have rubber tires instead of steel wheels. They have this, a lot of the trains in France operate with rubber tires instead of steel tires. So could that operate somehow in the middle or the edge of the 405 freeway, somehow through the freeway corridor right where all the cars, but a little above the traffic? And so that's one they're looking at as well. So again, this is very, very early. These are some of the first concepts that have come out. They don't have a lot of details for how they're going to work up here in the valley and how they connect to the stations, but it's just getting started. And so as we go forward with the Orange Line and with the Van Nuys Boulevard line, we want to be cognizant that in the future we really want this line to not just get you to North Hollywood, to the Red Line, but we want to connect you through the pass to the west side as well. So next steps, we're actually going to go to our board of directors Thursday this week to get approval on the East San Fernando Valley line, the Van Nuys Boulevard line, of the draft environmental and approved light rail for that. For the Orange Line, we're actually looking either in July or September to come back with a progress report and actually get approval to launch more fully into the design and the traffic studies with LADOT. And coordination with the Sepulveda and East San Fernando Valley projects. And then the gating, we want to have the test gate, the pilot gate up by this fall and invite people to come out and see it. And we'll show some demonstrations on how it's working if anybody's interested, or at least if you're on the Orange Line and you drive by, you'll see it operating as you go by. Let's see, I do want to introduce two other projects. If you're not bored with these, we have two more. I'll go through it quickly. This is the one I mentioned before, Cal State Northridge, Chatsworth, east-west line in the valley, connecting to North Hollywood or up to the north. We're getting started with the studies later in the summer, and we'll be having some meetings probably targeted more towards the North Valley or the Northeast Valley, but we'll probably have some here in North Hollywood, I think, as well, because some of the alignments are actually going to be coming here to North Hollywood, again on surface streets. So we'll be running arterial streets. It's basically a rapid bus, but they'd have much nicer stations than you have with rapid bus. They'd have some kind of signal priority that we work out with DOT to allow the buses to not have to stop at as many lights and try to speed that trip up for people. And these are all the communities it's going through. And some of the routes, we've actually got a few lines on the map that we're starting to talk to people about. Right now, I think they're on Nordhoff and Rosita, I think are the two that we're looking at. Is that right? Okay. Was it? Roscoe. Okay, thank you, Roscoe and Nordhoff. And picking up a station for Cal State Northridge, looking at the Metrolink station that serves the west side of the valley in Northridge, connecting to the stations at Chatsworth, and then looking at connecting into the East Valley. And that'll be, those meetings will be starting late summer. We'll be trying to get some ideas for which routes people think are the best, where the station stops should be, and input on that. And the last one I'll talk about is if you want to go from here to Pasadena right now, you have a choice. You can either take the Red Line to downtown, to Union Station, and transfer to the Gold Line to go to Pasadena. It's a fairly long trip to get to downtown and all the way back to Pasadena. Or you can go over and take our 501 bus that runs in the freeway over to Pasadena. But unfortunately, I live in Pasadena, and the schedule is every 40 minutes this time of night. It's not a very frequent service, and it runs on the freeway, so it doesn't have a lot of stops to places along the route that people want to go to. So we're looking at improving the 501 significantly, putting in a more frequent BRT-type service. And we have two options. One is one's a freeway alignment, one's this one, the primarily street alignment. If we stay on surface streets, like if, say, we were to come out of North Hollywood and go down Lankershim Boulevard, go over through the Burbank Media District, maybe go up Alameda, and sort of circle our way back through Burbank and Glendale and Eagle Rock to Pasadena, we have a lot of opportunities for station stops at major activity centers in downtown Glendale, the Burbank Media District, or the downtown Burbank, North Hollywood. We have a lot of options for serving uses and having stations, and maybe not as fast as if you're on the freeway, but with a more frequent service operating with some type of priority and better station stops. It would be a more attractive way to travel in this route, which is one of the really heavy travel routes we have in LA that doesn't have very much transit service at all. So this is actually a way of connecting these two places together. The freeway option is one where you could go from downtown Pasadena, get on the 134 freeway, sort of past the Rose Bowl, go past Eagle Rock, and go through downtown Glendale on where the freeway is depressed, and you might come up and have a station stop above ground near Brand or Central Street in Glendale, and then you have a choice of either going up the 5 to the Burbank Media District and over to the airport and back to North Hollywood, or you stay on the 134 freeway, hit the Media District, and then come up Lankershim into North Hollywood. So these are two major different types of alignments. One's very fast, commuter-oriented. One's a slower alignment that serves a lot more activity centers. So a lot of it's going to depend on what we hear in LA, Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena, folks along the way about what type of service they're looking for as far as the improvements that we could put in that line. But we do have the funding to build it. So they'll be starting their outreach meetings later in the fall too, probably in August, late August, maybe September, before they'll come back and try to target some of the communities and cities that they're proposing these projects in. So I'm going to hand it back to Karen on SB1 funding, and I think we have a little bit of talk about North Hollywood too.
So thank you so much. Thank you for those of us who are joining us. And I also want to acknowledge the almost 20 people who are logged in watching us online tonight. So thank you for making us part of your evening as well. I want to just touch a little bit on SB1. This came up a couple times as we were talking. So SB1 is our gas tax and fees that were passed, and those bring real local funding. So one of the things that we want to make sure folks in the San Fernando Valley know is that several Valley projects did very well with funding. So we got, Metro in general got $1.72 billion awarded to us. And the three projects here in the San Fernando Valley are some that you've already heard about tonight. So the East San Fernando Valley Transit Corridor project received some sizable funding from SB1. The one David just touched on, the North Hollywood to Pasadena Bus Rapid Transit, got some funding. And then the Orange Line, the reason that we're here tonight, has now up to $320 million in funding. So lest you think when you're gassing up at the pump that money's going to Sacramento, no, it's going right here to the San Fernando Valley. So it's important for you to know that. We wanted to share that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our last presenter of the night. I know some of you have been filling out these question cards. I know those of you online have been typing in your questions. We are going to move to Q&A, but next I'm going to introduce Wells Lawson. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Wells Lawson. I am here to talk to you or provide you an update on our North Hollywood Joint Development Project. As David said, you have all these lines coming into North Hollywood, so it's sort of the center of the action, if you will. And this is just a preliminary take from our perspective, talking to the various folks planning all these lines about what kind of ridership we're going to start seeing at the station over the next several decades. So ridership would increase substantially, probably nearly 35% through the station. For those of you who've gone through the station, you probably know it can get congested at times as people transfer from the orange line to the red line and vice versa. That's something we want to address as part of this whole effort. So it's kind of coming together in the joint development process. And it's, as it turns out, will be a really important point for all of these projects to make sense as a traveler as you're coming through the system. So the group that's doing it is my group. I'm from Transit Oriented Communities. This is an effort to build our system around transit in a way that people can drive less and take transit more. And within our program, we have a joint development group. And our joint development group is looking at the property that you all probably know of as the park and ride around the station. So to use my clicker here for those online, I'm pointing at the portal on the east side of the station. That's the big band shell, the kind of round series of things that you know identify the North Hollywood station right now. All surrounding that, we have 15 acres of land that Metro owns. Our goal is to take that land and work with a private developer to transform it into a station experience, if you will, that's really well connected to land use. We want to see housing. We want to have new shops and restaurants. We want to have open space. These are the types of things that have come up for us in the planning for this project. And to take you back, in 2016, we selected Trammell Crow to be our development partner along with the Cesar Chavez Foundation, which will build the affordable housing portion of the project. They have followed our lead on a series of workshops that we did in the fall of 2015, right here at this center and some other spots in North Hollywood, looking at, with the community, what should be built here and how can this best reflect the community's vision for North Hollywood. What we heard was we want to integrate the transit center. We want to bring these pieces together. So again, this station will now accommodate the NoHo Pasadena BRT, the North San Fernando Valley BRT, as well as the Orange Line improvements. And then when you think about the impact of the new Sepulveda Pass and the East San Fernando Valley line, this station gets very busy. So that's one big piece of it. But there's also on the land use side a desire to kind of break up this parcel that big parcel that is the park and ride right now into smaller streets so that you have sort of a finer grid of development, of smaller blocks with a variety of kind of building sizes and types. There was a desire to have significant open space for community gathering as part of the project. So those pieces got folded into the process. I'm not presenting to you a rendering today because I want to basically tee it up for the developer who's going to be coming back in the fall, early spring with their proposal for what this site should look like based on all those parameters. So this is more just an update to let you know we're still here. We haven't gone dark. We're working really hard with the developer to make sure that Metro's infrastructure needs are really clear so that when we do pull all these pieces together, we have what we need. Anyway, keep in touch. This is our website address, and I'll now turn it over to Karen, who manages Q&A, I'm sure.
Thank you so much. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to read out the questions that we've got, and then I'm going to invite some of our Metro staff experts to come up and help answer the questions. So again, if you've got them, raise your hands. And I see Tito's running around. I see hands going up. I'm sure there's a few folks weighing in online. So we'll do our best to work through the questions that we can. Some of them we may not get to all of them tonight, and so we'll try to ask you to come up back. We'll go back to our open house format and be available to answer questions. And those of you online, if we don't get to your question, you can use the online comment form or email us at the project email address as well. So the first question I'm going to ask Scott Page to come up and answer. We have a gentleman who'd like to know whether we're going to be designating an Uber Lyft pickup point at Owens Mouth along what was the Orange Line.
That's actually a good question. Currently, the Owens Mouth Transit Center is really owned by the City of LA. It's a LA DOT facility. The sidewalks are LA DOT. We were just kind of like using them. We weren't renting them, but we were using them as a public service. So it just so happens I'm working with Councilman Weezar's office in downtown LA to establish a Uber and Lyft pickup location that's adjacent to one of our bus stops so that we can, get the Ubers and Lyfts into their own space. And it's going to be similar to what we have, or what you might experience at LAX when you fly into LAX, where you have lettered pickup and drop-off points at LAX, because Uber can actually use a GPS system that can assign a specific location for you to wait at. And Owens Mouth is a pretty long street, so I can certainly approach the City of LA about establishing a Uber and Lyft pickup and drop-off spot on Owens Mouth. And that's basically all I can say about that. So I'll just take it up with the City of LA and see if they're interested in doing that along Owens Mouth, where we currently have an existing stop, which is still a stop, by the way, for line 601, line 750, and line 224, I think it is, something like that. So, there's still buses stopping at that location, so that's a good idea.
Thank you. Our next question digs in a little bit more on the bike path. So the sort of comment question is, the current bike pedestrian path along the Orange Line is inadequate. The sidewalk ramps are dangerous. Having to use the big button on a bicycle is different. Can we get a new setup like what currently exists in Canoga and Chatsworth east of Canoga Station? So David, maybe I'm going to ask you to come up and answer that.
I think that's a design question. I think, as I understand the question, the speaker likes the one on Canoga but doesn't like the one that's on the east-west line. And so that is something we can take a look at. The plan right now is not to really redesign the busway on the at-grade segments, but to keep it the way it is, but to add the gates. So there isn't a plan right now to actually redesign the bikeway that's along the, but the one on Canoga would also remain. But I think as we were looking at the stations along the route, we will be redesigning the stations. So I think there is an opportunity here as we come out with the designs for each of the stations along the route, as we'll be upgrading them and improving them to see how the bike path facilities interact with the stations. And of course, we're always looking for ways to improve that. So I think as the bike ridership continues to improve and grow, then we have a separate funding source that we go through for our active transportation program that we look at for bikes and peds, and First and Last Mile is another program we have for around transit stations. So there's some opportunities. I think what I would recommend is that as we come back with the designs and start showing them, we'll get some input on what we can do on the bike path and either try to fix it as a part of this project or find a separate way to do it.
Thank you. One of the things that David talked about was increased ridership. And so the question we have tonight is, if Metro implemented bus bunching along the Orange Line, could we double the capacity? And Steve Schupak's going to take a crack at that one.
Thanks. That's actually a very interesting and technologically challenging question. We actually have been looking at this possibility on feasibility, if it's feasible, on what's called platooning, where we have two vehicles going through intersections at very, very close distances so that we can minimize the downtime of crossing gates and get more throughput through the system. It does create some challenges, whether it's directly connected, electronically connected. Right now, we haven't found a system that is service-proven that's actually in production yet to do it, but we are investigating it with our bus manufacturers.
And I think that leads to a related question that we just got online, which is, you are bringing in ideas to increase ridership in all of the projects, and as Wells talked about, this is part of what Metro is looking at, is as ridership increases, how do we plan for that at stations? But the question here is, can we make our trains longer to make them more comfortable for riders? So thinking about the Red Line, and I think Steve covered the Orange Line, but as we look ahead to Sepulveda and some of those, are we looking at more cars? Are we looking at adding more capacity? Do you want to take that, David?
Yeah, so a lot of our light rail trains now are 2 cars long. In some cases, we have them 3 cars long. The heavy rail trains are longer than that. The light rail platforms are about 270 feet long. The heavy rail platforms are 450 feet long. So the Red Line cars that we have down here, down the street, are it's about a 450-foot long train, so that's why it has so much more capacity than the light rail. But the heavy rail has to run in tunnels or grade separations. Light rail has the flexibility; it can run on surface streets or railroad rights-of-way, so it's a little bit smaller vehicle, doesn't carry quite as many people. I think on the Sepulveda Pass project, people have said, well, if you run heavy rail, maybe you can carry all the demand you want, but if you run light rail, are you going to have crowded people and not enough capacity? So some of those options are looking at, could we have 2 lines, maybe one that have 4 cars and one would have 3, and we could actually intersperse them some way that we can actually get higher capacity and more frequent headways. So we have a lot of opportunities when we get into the mountains. If we're in a subway tunnel, we can actually run trains as frequently as every 2 or 2.5 minutes if we have to. So there's a lot of ways to get capacity without necessarily lengthening the trains so that they might be difficult to run on city streets. So we have to sort of the trade-offs of how do we compare capacity with the length of the train with capacity of the frequency of the number of trains going through. So these are trade-offs, and I think I said on Van Nuys Boulevard, we're looking at 3-car platforms if it's light rail, which is the biggest ones we have right now. But in the future, we think the ridership is going to go, particularly in something like the Sepulveda Pass, might be even greater than that. We need to look at either heavy rail or maybe having trains that are dedicated just through the mountain segment with longer train sets. So that's definitely a good question.
Another question we got about the Orange Line project tonight is, if we're looking at crossing gates, you know, this person says, my concern from experience in West LA is that sometimes there can be delays when there are gates. I'm probably thinking of the Expo line. How are we going to address that here in the San Fernando Valley if we have drivers, and we have a lot of drivers in the San Fernando Valley, and trying to interface with the gates and the traffic?
Good questions tonight. Wow. Okay, so right now the buses on the Orange Line on the peak, they run 1 bus every 4 minutes, and the city gives us a signal priority as much as they can so that every 4 minutes the bus can get a green light. Doesn't happen all the time, but we try to achieve that depending on traffic conditions. If we put gates in, the concern is the gates are going to block the north-south traffic and people have longer delays. So what we've been talking to the city about is maybe we don't run the buses as frequently. Instead of running 1 bus every 4 minutes, we might run a convoy of 2 buses every 6 minutes. And by doing that, we have less interruption of the traffic lights on the north-south streets, but we can carry more people than we can under the current situation. So that's what we're talking to DOT about. They haven't said yes by any means. We have to go through all the details, the technical aspects of that. But that's our goal, is to have less impact than we have today, but carry more people faster. That's kind of the goal. But we understand a lot of motorists out there. We don't want to be the wrath of angry motorists either. So we're going to try to strike that balance and get better transit service and not impact traffic any more than it is today.
We're running a little short on time, so I'm going to group the next two questions together because I know these are issues that are really important. And these relate to system insecurity along the metro system. So whether that's here at stations, and some questions about some reports about showers and some facilities and some services that Metro is providing potentially to homeless individuals, and then what's happening on some of our system. And I know our elected officials here tonight get these questions as often as I do. And so I think one of the comments here was ridership is down in some cases because of system security. And we know that to be true. We at Metro are not a homeless service provider agency, but we are, as a matter of fact, transporting a lot of individuals who are homeless, who are looking for shelter in safe places, whether it's on our red line, whether it's on our orange line. Some of our overnight buses that run throughout the night have been particularly impacted. In the San Fernando Valley, we have a lot of bus service, and so we have seen a lot of these issues on our system and around our stations. So we are doing a lot of things at the direction of our board to address that. Over the last year, we have implemented homeless outreach teams, and so we have multi-agency teams that are going onto the red line, going onto the bus system, working with individuals who are homeless to try to get them into some kind of supportive services. So that's working pretty well. We've actually had some success rate, higher than we even expected, about 20%. So our board is funding more of those outreach teams to continue that good work. We're also partnering with our supervisor's office. We work a lot with Sheila Kuehl's office to do Homeless Connect Days, where we come out and we provide services, and we try to get folks tap cards and things like that and get them out of the streets and into services. And then our board has directed us to look at showers at North Hollywood and some services like that. What could be provided in a safe way, in a secure way. As a practical matter, if you're over in Van Nuys, you know that our parking lot is surrounded by homeless encampments. So how can we address that and make our patrons feel safe? It is our goal to provide a quality ridership experience. And so if people don't feel safe on our system, they won't ride. Scott talked about our Next Gen study, and he can talk to you a little bit about the survey results, but certainly we have heard that from people who have left our system, and we are as anxious as our city partners and our county partners to decrease the number of homeless in Los Angeles County, and so we want to be part of that solution. So that's my little quick answer on what we're doing there. But I do want to acknowledge it because I know it's an issue that we hear across the San Fernando Valley. I have a question I think I'm going to ask David to come back and answer, just switching gears a little bit. You talked about the Sepulveda Transit Corridor project. Will that be targeted for completion by the Olympics in 2028?
Right now, the funding isn't there to deliver it by 2028, but the aspiration is there to do it, and our board has a 28 by 28 initiative where they want us to deliver 28 projects by 2028 and have them all open by the time of the Olympics, and several of those are here in the Valley. The Van Nuys project is one of them, the Northeast San Fernando Valley, the NoHo to Pasadena is one of them, but Sepulveda right now is not, just because it's such an expensive project to build, but maybe, we'll see, but not yet for that one.
I'm going to take one last question because it's 7:30 and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And so I may pull David back up for this one, but I'm going to take a stab at it myself. So one of the projects that David presented tonight was the North San Fernando Valley BRT project that would be potentially parallel the Orange Line up in the North Valley. And I know we already got this question doing a little bit of outreach this week, Sarah and I last week. Why is the North Valley getting a bus line but not light rail? So now that we finally have the East San Fernando project getting light rail, the question I think we're going to get now across the rest of the valley is, why can't we have light rail too? So I think if you want to take a little crack at that, and it goes back to the funding that we have.
So, well, I think the answer right now is that we don't have a lot of transit riders in service in the North Valley, so we have to build a ridership base first. And I think light rail would be wonderful if we could build it everywhere in the county, but we sort of have to pick our spots where there's a really strong existing ridership base, and then we can go to rail. I think the Orange Line is a case in point where originally we were going to try to build light rail on the Orange Line, and we actually went back to the bus service because there was some doubt about whether we could actually get enough riders, whether people would actually ride it. And so by opening it with bus, we demonstrated that we can get 30,000 people a day riding that bus line, and it's getting crowded. And so now the effort is, well, let's see if we can get the buses from 30,000 up to 40,000 or 50,000, and then maybe at that point we can shift over to a rail line, which our Expo line carries 60,000 a day. The Blue line carries close to 80,000 a day. So we actually can carry some very much higher numbers with light rail, but we sort of have to establish a pattern of ridership, and a lot of people have to change habits. We have to change have better stations. We have to do a lot of work to get the bus lines operating from local bus, which we have today, up to rapid bus, to bus rapid transit, and then to light rail. So we sort of have steps we have to go through and try to put them where they do serve the most number of riders, and we have a lot of transit riders. I think the Northeast Valley can be good. I mean, certainly Cal State Northridge, I think the student enrollment is comparable to UCLA now. I think they're at 40,000, something along that ballpark. So we may really have the basis to get some good transit ridership up in that part of the valley and demonstrate that it's there. And then let's come back and talk about light rail. I'd love to do that.
With that, I know we didn't quite get to everyone's questions, but we will be here until 8 o'clock. And if you're watching us online, you can email the project email address and let us know your thoughts as well. But we are going to go ahead and end the meeting here so we can get back to our open house. Thank you for all of you who joined us tonight in person, and good night.